This is it. The podcast, My Road Trips Planner. Hey, my name is Shane. If you're looking for a podcast that talks about road trips, you found it right here, right now. So I want to start off with this. This is the full podcast. So this is about 15 minutes or a little longer. And I've been doing 1 minute with Shane. And I think today was the third one I posted. I want to just start putting out material. It's not going to be perfect. Sometimes it may not be pretty. It may not be crisp and to the point. But I think for me, I just want to get this out here. You know, I've been on road trips ever since I was probably about 5-6 years old. I remember taking trips with my parents. I remember taking trips with, friends, family. And I think ultimately what I've really enjoyed is waking up in a new place. I think that's the first thing. But before we get going, I want to talk about 3 things today in this podcast. I want to talk about new beginnings. I want to talk about the middle of a story. And then I want to talk about where we're going. And so I want to start out with the beginning. And so that's what I just talked about a little bit, about being on road trips since I was 5 or 6 years old. I just remember getting my license was probably one of the most amazing days of my life. I really believe that was a day for me where I felt a little bit of freedom. I was about 16 and a half years old. I was able to pass it on the first test. And I don't know if my buddy John Licio, if you listen to this, I remember you came back and you told me about this turn that people forget to take. And this was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where I took the test. It was at the old DMV. This is how long ago I took the test. And I remember you said to me, hey, you can't go straight. You have to turn left and bend with the road. And so I remember you telling me that, and I passed my test because of that. And you said that so many people, they just drive through it because the driving instructor says, hey, just so you know, I just want you to drive and follow the signs on the road. And that's it. And so when you're a 16-year-old kid, you've just learned in the last 6 months how to drive. It can be a little scary, but these are things that you have to know when you're learning to drive. So that started out really well. So I appreciate that, John. Thanks again for helping me get my license. And I think the biggest thing is that from that freedom, being able to drive, and I remember right before I turned 18 is when I took a big road trip. I remember going out of state. I didn't really say anything to anybody. I just jumped in my car and took off. And at this time, and so when did I turn 18? So I believe that was 1999. And so what had happened is that I was able to get a phone after I graduated, but you couldn't really use your cell phone everywhere across the country. Cell phones were becoming a newer thing, part of life, but it wasn't everywhere. It was around the country, but the towers, you can only use certain towers. You'll be roaming. There's a lot of things. I just can't remember all of them, but I remember I couldn't use the phone, so I had to use a payphone to call friends and family and just say, hey, I'm on the road. And today, you don't have to do that. You could take off and just pick up your phone when you get into a pretty, not even busy area, and you could call somebody. So that was the beginning of my road trips. I remember going to Chicago, stopping and getting a deep dish pizza. I remember driving to Wisconsin just to get cheese. That was a great trip. I went straight up Michigan, came around the Panhandle, and went down into Wisconsin. And so for me, that's always been the beginning of road trips. And I think road trips is one of those things that, for me, bring encouragement. It brings a foundation of just excitement for me, because I love waking up in a new place. planning a road trip is amazing. There's just so many things that I've come to realize that when it comes to road trips, I love them so much. Give me one moment. I'm just going to take a sip of water. But at the end of the day, I just want to come to that place where road trips help me get to the next place in life. And I'll explain that in a moment. I think for me, when it comes to road trips, I've come to a place where it's helped me personally. I know this might not be for everybody. I know a lot of people who don't want to jump in a car and drive across country, and that's totally fine. That's up to you. But for me, it brings a sort of excitement. You're probably going to hear noises. I'm sitting in a parking lot at a grocery store, so there'll probably be a lot of cars and stuff like that. But for me, it makes me get out of the everyday mundane of my life. I love my life. I enjoy spending time with my family. I got 2 amazing boys. I have a beautiful, wonderful wife, Kate, and, I have a blessed life. I do. But for me, when it comes to a road trip, it recharges my batteries. I remember watching, I believe it was called National Parks, America's Great or Greatest Idea. And I believe it's by Ken Burns. And I watched this 6-part miniseries. They're about 2 hours each, the episodes. And I remember John Muir. And John Muir was a writer. He was a father. He was a husband. But he really loved the environment. And I just remember listening to his stories, but the thing that stood out the most was when his wife told him, you need to go back out to the woods. You need to go back into the wilderness. You need to go back into God's creation, because that's where you recharge. And so for me, sitting in a car, driving in a car, that recharges my battery. And I don't know if that's for you or anybody else, but for me, I definitely get my battery recharged by driving, by going to a new place, by seeing a new place. And I think there's a lot of people like that. I think people enjoy vacations. I believe people enjoy traveling. Maybe not the traveling part of getting on maybe an airplane, being stuck on a plane for a while, hours with other people. But I think mostly people do enjoy the vacation or the time off overall. But for me, specifically, is road trips. Road trips for me is that it's like getting a jump. When you get your battery jumped and your battery feels like it's dead, it's not charging properly, and somebody comes over and they plug their car in and it gives you a jump. That's road trips for me. And so that's always been like that. So since the beginning, so we've talked about the beginning. Now let's talk about the middle. This past year, I put out 100 podcasts, but they're about 15 minutes, and they're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And it's under Myroadtripsplanner, all one word. And what I learned from that very quickly is that the audio is not perfect. This is probably not perfect either, but I'm learning as I go along. And the one thing I'm noticing more and more that I need to do is just be myself. I may not be for everybody, and that's okay. But I know there's a few of you out there that enjoy learning about trips, the tips, and just about road trips in particular. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is that there's always people out there that want to do something different. And so the middle of this story has been finding ways to go on road trips. Once a year for me and my buddy John Chambriello, the Connecticut wedding singer. If you need a Connecticut wedding singer, he is John Chambriello, the Connecticut wedding singer. And if you just Google it that way, the Connecticut wedding singer, John Chambriello shows up. But I think most of all, what I've loved about road trips but also the podcasting part of it, is that to get the stories out there. I want to tell stories. But I also want people to know we can start from anywhere. This is not easy for me. I'm a person who doesn't, want people, I want people to enjoy this stuff, but I also don't want to make anyone unhappy or dislike me or anything like that. But I've come to the point in my 43 years of life that I've just come to a place where it's like, hey, you get to live once. And in this life, you get one shot at it. There's no going back. I don't get to rewind the tape. I don't get to do all these other things. But one thing I do know is I have this moment, I have this time. And I also want to show my boys that, they're young right now, 11 and 6 years old, that if you want to do something, go do it. And that you just got to put yourself out there. You ain't going to make everybody happy. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be haters and things like that. And I know there's probably people already like, oh, you're already starting this rant. No. I'm not starting to rant. I'm just starting to say, this is where I am in my life. Sometimes this isn't going to be perfect. It ain't going to be pretty. But one thing you're going to get Shane. You're going to get Shane Coriano, and that's it. I'm real. I'm live. I'm here. And this is who I am. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. And those are the things I push to be. I'm not perfect. I'm going to make mistakes. But at the end of the day, we're going to do this. Because there's only one life. And that's it. So that's the middle right there. That's part of the middle. And so I'm doing these 1 minute with Shane's. And they'll be on my Instagram account. Myroadtripsplanner. And also they'll be posted on my regular Instagram, Shane Coriano. My Facebook page, Shane Coriano. And that's a Shane with a Y. Just in case you're looking up Shane, it's Shayne. And so what's the future? Where are we going next? I don't know. I'm not going to give everything out. I feel like when I talk about a lot of stuff to everybody, I feel like I don't get a lot of it done. And so my feeling is this. I'm going to try to come on here every day, Monday through Friday, give you a 1 minute, and I'm going to try to do a podcast at least once a week like this, where I can give you a conversation. I'm going to tell you a story. And so the beginning was a kid on a road trip. The middle was a guy trying to figure out what this podcast thing is all about. And then where are we going? I don't know. We'll see what happens. Because I only know one thing, is that there's only one life, there's only one chance, and nothing else. You don't get to rewind this again. You don't get to go back and say, hey, can I go back 2-3 years? Can I go back and take this back? You don't get that. It's just how it is. And I think there are some things you have to remember that are inevitable. And I probably didn't come out right, but that there are things that are just going to happen. And they're just going to happen. Again, you don't get me, Shane. I am who I am, and that's all there is to it. Do I want to learn things? Yes, I want to learn each and every day. I want to be a better man than I was yesterday. I want to be a better husband than I was yesterday. I want to be a better father than I was yesterday. But all I know is this is it. This is it. The podcast, My Road Trips Planner. Hey, my name is Shane. I appreciate if you've listened this long. Listen, we're here to talk about trips on the road. I love them. I enjoy them. We'll talk about stories from El Paso being there. I thought one of the most amazing towns I've ever been in. Long ride from San Antonio to El Paso. That was about 9 to 10 hours. My road trips being in California. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. And so thanks again. I appreciate this. This is going to be up on my YouTube. Also, if you want to see the video, it's really just me sitting in the car. And I want to give a shout out to the Wilds. This is out in Ohio. They are a conservative, not a conservation place for animals. It's beautiful. I loved it. It was one of the best places. So if you're like, what's he wearing? That's what I'm wearing. It's called the Wilds. It's out in Ohio, and they partner with the Columbus Zoo. But they are an absolute awesome place. It's very spread out, wide animals. They're not. It's not a sponsor. It's just a shout out because of the shirt. If you're like, what is he wearing? That's what I'm wearing. So if you get a chance, that's a great. We'll talk about that too. We've talked about that in the other podcast, Myroadtripsplanner, which is on Apple Podcast. Again, I know I'm a little all over the place, and we'll get this more crisp as we go along. But again, you're just gonna get me. So let's end this off. As I always say, if you've listened to my other podcasts, the road's open. Let's drive.